Hello, welcome to our presentation. For those who found your way over here, you're a lot more smarter than me because it took me 20 minutes to figure out where I was supposed to present yesterday. So thank you for being here. Let's get started. So my name's Kevin Yu. I work for Fifth Third Bank on customer identity architecture, being in the field for 20-some years purely by accident. Someone needed a vacation and they need a Unix guy. I've been the Unix guy, got into identity, and stayed there ever since. With the last 5 years, focus on customer identity for financial institutions. With that, Brock.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Brock Humes. I have that word salad title there, but really I'm the fraud guy that manages the digital authentication fraud strategies for the bank. I've been in fraud about 30 years in a lot of different capacities. Started out catching shoplifters and then decided that that was not a good career to be in, and moved my way up and never left fraud, but got into something that used my brain a little bit more and had a little bit of a wider reach. So thank you all for coming today. We're happy to have our talk.
Thank you. So what we're going to go through a couple of things. One, what are credential abuse attacks? What a type of things that's going on today, what happened in the past. And then Brock going to give us a few real-world examples that we've seen from our company. And then what we did, what we're trying to do to counter that, and what are the lessons learned and stuff like that. Let's dive right into it. I don't know how many of you heard Fifth Third Bank. Great, thank you. I was going to say, if not, don't feel bad, because I never heard of it before a recruiter called me, right? It's actually a large regional bank with 160 years history, serve 11 states, but the points are, it's being very innovative. It created a nation's first ATM network. And most recently, we're launching embedded finance offering line of a business. So whatever we say here doesn't really represent the bank. It's our own opinion. So credential abuse attacks started whenever the password showed up, right? Initially, it's a brute force. The bad guys just throw combinations of things on the wall and see which one sticks. And then they got smarter. They started to build using dictionaries and stuff like that. Most recently, or in the last 10 years also, because there are large number of breaches over different entities for leaked credentials. So there are passwords, username combinations that's out there for a while. And people tend to use passwords repetitively across websites. Everybody does. I do to a certain extent, right? So with that being said, now the bad actors start to use those stolen credentials and try different websites, organizations, see which one will go through. A lot more probability to get through, right? And then they turn around, do something called credential spraying. What does it mean? If they find one credential actually works, they're going to turn around and do the same thing using that successful, identified, validated credential against other similar websites. Like, they tried our bank and somehow got in, and then they try other banks. The rate of getting in is much bigger. Where they get in, if they do, it's more of a traditional bank, traditional channels like web, mobile, call center, IVR, all that stuff. I think the point is not only they stick with one channel, they actually use different channels in one attack. That started somewhere, maybe IVR gets to a certain point and then switch to web or mobile to finish it up. And then recently we've seen some third-party channel being used as a attack vector. What does it mean? For those who's not in financial institution or financial sector, you may not know aggregators. Aggregators are those organizations sitting between the fintech and the banks. They connect with multiple banks. And you can put your account over there, or you log in, and through them, you log into different banks. They collect those information for you, consolidated in one place. Like some payment, apps and stuff like that all use some common aggregators. And we have seen some bad actors are using aggregators as a channel. Not that aggregators did something wrong, that's their function, but that function being used in attacks. As well as consumer devices, right? So we all have a little checkbox say, hey, trust my device. Guess what? If that device is not secured, and most likely in consumer space, it's not secured. And then you open up another door for bad actors to come in. So with that, let's see some real-world examples here.
So we've been seeing a large distributed attack for quite some time now in our consumer space. And it started out really easily, right? We didn't have our defenses prepared properly, so they were able to hit us with thousands of requests from a single IP address. That was pretty easy for us to detect and pretty easy for us to remediate. Within a few days, they modified their attack, and they continued to modify and modify as we continue to modify. It's one of the things I like about the job, is trying to stay one step ahead, and they're certainly giving us that challenge. So they went from that single IP address and single device where they didn't have to try. Now they have slowed down their attack and distributed it across hundreds of IPs in a single day. And it's very interesting. They still leave behind a signature that we can detect. They slow that down on a single IP. We might see 20 or 30 logins, in a 5 or 6 hour period, which looks much more like normal traffic. They rotate their device characteristics every time to look like different users logging in. But as soon as they get a valid login, which is not very frequent, right? Their success rate is very low. We see that most of the credentials that they submit to us don't meet our minimum requirements for a username, so they're coming from somewhere else. They're not ever going to succeed, but they do get things right from time to time. And then they abandon that IP either right after that valid login, or we may see one invalid login for a different credential after that, and then they're done with that IP for the day. And that really helps us identify those IPs that they're using for that day, even though they're trying to remain under the radar. They also are using a recognizable device pattern. A couple examples here. So the iPhone with a common English-sounding first name, either in parentheses or not. That alone obviously isn't indicative of fraud, because there are some customers out there that have that exact same situation. But when we see that, in addition to the other things, right, when we build that depth of X, Y, and Z, and the IP address they're coming from has a high rate of failures because their data quality is poor, right? They're just throwing everything at us that they can. It's pretty easy to identify the customers we need to remediate. The purpose of the person we're dealing with right now is not to immediately monetize those accounts, right? We believe they're selling the accounts because we're seeing those accounts being attempted, 14 days after the fact, right? They process it through. But with our device registration process, they weren't actually being able to get in to get balances, right? Which is one of the factors they use to sell those accounts for more money. So they turned to aggregators, as Kevin mentioned earlier. And the aggregators, we don't have the same protections there. We don't have that device registration. They're able to get to those balances so they can monetize those accounts appropriately. But thankfully, because it's not immediate monetization, we get those accounts secured, get the customer contacted, and get them resolved. The eye chart down at the bottom really isn't meant to be read. The top is our login success rate by day, and the bottom is the invalid user IDs by day. So as you can see, and this is as a percentage of total, as you can see, as the attacks go up, our overall success rate for logins on our website and mobile app drops, and there's a day in there that was right around 6% valid logins. So it's a large attack. If we want to move to a second category, this is on our commercial side, and any of the financial institution partners that might be in here are probably dealing with this exact same actor. They've been targeting our commercial customers since 2020, as well as a lot of other banks. And their approach is very different, right? The last example, they're looking for whatever sticks, whatever they can get. These folks are very targeted. In fact, they're placing ads on all of the large search engines. They started with Google, and then they moved through the lesser search engines as we developed a good relationship with Google, and we're getting those ads taken down. But they were placing those ads above ours, and there's a real example there on the bottom right. That top search result is not us, and the second one is. So they also targeted outside our home area. They weren't targeting the ads where we could easily find them in Cincinnati, where we're located. So they actually harvest the credentials and the one-time passcode that we use in commercial directly from the customer by replicating our website. They immediately log in using those credentials and the OTP before it expires. And the difference here is they immediately attempt large dollar wires or ACHs. That's not something that's available in our consumer platform, thankfully. Please don't tell management that that's a good idea. And this is a very low volume attack, right? We might see 1 or 2 of these in a day if the ad stays up long enough. And it's low volume, high potential loss. One of the things that's really indicative here of fraud is when you look at the source IP, it's routing out of Europe. But when you look at what this particular actor uses, they have commandeered domestic, small business, and residential IP addresses that look exactly like what we would expect to see our customer come from. They're not just throwing IP addresses at us from random places. They're very targeted to look like our real customer. And then as we get effective, and the most effective thing we've been able to do is identify those ads as soon as they're posted, right? We have a process through InfoSecurity to do that, and then get those takedown requests set up as quickly as possible. In more recent times, we've been able to work with the ad sellers to make sure that people can't put ad keywords that match our branding, right? That was clearly a miss on our part, something we should have been doing sooner. And I think that the search engine folks are also seeing what this is doing across, many platforms, and they're being much more helpful after we've established those relationships, after we knew who we needed to contact. And then the attacker will move to another bank. So we saw him in December of 2023, and he made one attempt for us, and we were able to stop it. And then we didn't see him again until April of 2024. But as we talk with other banks and collaborate, and that's one of the other things about handling these attacks is that collaboration level, we see an improvement. I want to touch really quickly on phishing. I think I'd be remiss not to touch on that. This back in our consumer, right? I think we've all received text messages pretending to be from a bank you may or may not have. We certainly see that as well. Customers fall for these all the time. And probably my most egregious example is over a course of a few days, we gave out 50 one-time passcodes to our customer that they passed on to that fraudster. 50 is not an exaggeration. And that's one of the things that we fight with is customer is our weakest link when it comes to the consumer site. Kevin?
Thank you. So at this point, my vendor friends is going to say, hey, turn on MFA, or better yet, passwordless. You'll solve your problem. I'm not saying MFA doesn't work. You do need to have MFA on, but MFA alone will not solve your problems, right? The common MFA factors are these, and NIST a couple of years ago already categorized SMS OTP being non-secure, but those still widely used for the simple reason of it doesn't really require any special devices or special enrollment process. So it's being widely adopted in the consumer space. But there are a lot more things that bad actors can do to those, like push bombing, right? If I can guarantee you, if someone sent my wife push notifications while she's busy 5 times, she's gonna hit the approve just to make the notification go away, right? That's quite common. And social engineering, you heard from Brock, 50 OTPs that person gave out to bad actors over a couple of days. Over a couple of days, 50 OTPs. Think about that. So given all that, what did we do to protect our bank, to protect the consumers, right? We are building layers. But it doesn't mean we got that all figured out. It's an ongoing battle day after day. So I was joking with Brock, the bad actors really give us a job security that's out there. It's a bad thing, but unfortunately that's something we have to deal with day in and day out. First, you got to shore up your edge security. You got to have something to detect the bots, to stop the bots, to have the rate limiting. And there are challenges that's out there, right? Thinking about the aggregators I mentioned earlier. The aggregators, by definition, it's bots. It's a good bot, right? You want those to come in, but there are a lot more bad bots that's out there. So we're struggling a little bit for large aggregators. It's easy to get their IPs and whitelisting and all that. But for smaller aggregators, it's hard. We're still working on things like that. Enrich risk assessments. Use consortium data to figure out what are the real risky transactions and bump it up from there or deny all at once. There are different things that we're considering leverage on top of the consortium data. It's like behavioral biometrics, right? There are many different vendors that's out there. We're still working on that and looking at that. Turn it on but not enforcing anything. Is that sometimes it's very challenging to have that reasonable false positive rate, so to speak. And there are capabilities like compromised password, compromised credential detection. We're working on something like that as well. That's upcoming. Advanced intelligence gathering is more of the ad searching and proactively monitor dark side and stuff like that to make sure that if there are some threats coming out, we know ahead of time and we know how to deal with it. Let me see. Enhanced authentication. What does it mean? MFA, right? MFA, SMOTP have its own drawbacks, but we have to use it. So what we do is to tap into the carrier data, mobile carrier data, to detect SIM swap, to detect some of the risky factors like that, to kind of beef it up. And then some authentication mechanisms in the bank, because of the legacy system is not up to the modern infrastructure, not using a modern kind of OAuth protocols. So we're modernize those systems to get on the modern platform. Human layers is actually the most difficult piece. I don't think we have a good answer. What we experienced is, one, that when we're dealing with specific cases with the customer, provide some transparency into it, provide some direct message to it. So they learn from that process. These are the things that's happening, really happening. Here's how you got into this situation. So next time, give them a little bit of education in the process. Also, awareness campaign. We're going through some awareness campaign through digital channels as well as branch channels. Let me see. Collaboration is actually very important. Internally, we collaborate from information security, that's where I am, and Brock is from financial crimes. So I feel like at the bank, we're fortunate enough to be a bigger size that we can do things effectively with a financial strength. At the same time, we're small enough to know each other personally, to quickly establish that connection, be able to work together. And externally, it's more of leveraging something like FS-ISAC, as well as some personal connections with different FIs to exchange some of the intels like this I feel like for different banks, different financial institutions, when you're talking about a financial crime, when you're talking about a cyber crime or cyber attack, people tend to work together as opposed to compete together. So we're getting together to go against the bad guys that seem to give us a little bit of edge up in collaboration. With that, let me turn it to Brock on some outcomes and lessons learned that we have in the process.
So once we convinced management that device registration was a critical piece that we had to force, right? There's a lot of pushback from a customer experience standpoint. But once we had convinced them, it didn't take long for us to realize that was not enough. And the aggregators alone are the reason why that is. And now we're looking at strengthening our position with those aggregators. We're certainly lagging in that area at the moment, but we're working on that. And one of the other things we learned early on, that as to expand on what Kevin said, engaging and educating other areas of the bank is key. InfoSecurity and I work really closely together. I also work very closely with the commercial line of business for that particular commercial attack. Making sure everyone understands what the cost is for these attacks to continue helps them digest when we have to raise our friction rate or when we have to decline a customer that otherwise we wouldn't have. Savings, right? Everyone likes to save money. We are no different there. The infrastructure savings that we have by being able to reduce these attacks that we're spending for resources we don't need when that attack is not going on. Call center costs. I've talked more about how much per minute it takes for one of our folks to be on the phone than I ever care to admit. But reducing that and showing them how if we have less attacks, we have less blocked passwords, which we have to have customers call in and reset so that we can verify they actually are the real customer. That gets them to support some of the things we're trying to do because they see the benefit for them. And probably one of the toughest nuts to crack is marketing, because to solve a problem where the customer is sometimes the core of the problem, direct communication to the customer using plain English, not trying to beat around the bush in a marketing way, but being very straightforward and saying, people are targeting Fifth Third Bank and your Fifth Third Bank's bank accounts, and here's what you can do to help protect yourself, instead of wordsmithing that. Making them realize that direct communication is a benefit, and customers appreciate that direct communication, and it's not a negative to say the Fifth Third is under attack, because everybody else is under attack, whether they say it or they don't. I also feel that we have a responsibility to stop these attacks, even if the loss isn't ours, right? For all of those credentials that do get validated, we know that credential is going to be attempted in 100 different places, and it's probably valid in some of those places as well. If we're able to send back the right signals and not validate that credential, even if it is correct, that may be abandoned by that fraudster. And we're actually saving that customer in another area where they do business. Some of the challenges we still have, so mobile network operator, to validate a phone number before we send a one-time passcode, make sure that phone belongs to them. That's not a perfect service. We have customers with no eligible one-time passcode device. They only have a home phone. I don't understand that. Apologies if that's you. But it's really close to my parents. It's very, very close. I don't think my mother really grasps texting very well. And customers with a limited public history, right? Not only do we use, does the phone belong to you? Does the carrier say the phone belongs to you? There's a lot of people that don't pay for their own phone lines, right? They're on their families or friends or whatever. So the data that comes back to us says that phone number probably doesn't belong to them. And that makes it harder for us to rely solely on that. And MVNOs and non-fixed VoIPs are certainly still a problem as well. Customer outrage, when their account is compromised, they immediately assume it's the bank, and probably rightfully so. Educating that is very important as well. And not forgetting those other channels. You cannot forget those other channels. Kevin?
All right. With that, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.